Hello again, and welcome to another episode of Stories from Real Life. I'm your host, Melvin E. Edwards. Thank you for joining me for the podcast where personal stories can have a global impact. My guest today is Elizabethtown College engineering professor, Dr. Tomás Estrada. Tomás, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Mel. I'm delighted to be here. Really excited to get this conversation underway.
I'm really excited too. This is very personal for me. And I'm going to tell now how I met you and why it's personal.
Yeah.
So I first met Dr. Estrada when my son Damon and I were visiting the campus for, I think it was called Prospective STEM Student Day. And that was 10 years ago. It's hard to believe that was already 10 years ago. So
that's wild.
And there was a friendly competition for students who were thinking of coming to Elizabethtown to major in engineering. And I don't know if you remember that competition or that day in particular. Do you remember that?
I do. Yeah, we had a number of activities. Amongst them, there was like the machine design challenge, we called it, where they had to design their own small car and race them based on a limited number of parts, where they had to be fairly creative as to how they put that together. Yep.
Well,
it's a fun day.
There was something you said after that competition that really influenced Damon's decision to come to Elizabethtown. And you may not even remember this part. You came up to me afterwards. He was there during the competition. I was off just walking around the campus. And when I came back to pick him up, you came up to me and you said, your son really has a talent for machines. And something that simple was really encouraging to me and to him. And he was being recruited by several colleges for baseball. So he was specifically looking for baseball and engineering at a small school, which is not easy. There are plenty of schools that have
not an
baseball,
easy combination,
but not a lot of small schools have a full, complete engineering program. And so he was really had narrowed it down to two. And that comment you made sort of tipped the scale that, well, he also really liked the baseball coach too. But that told me you recognized something in him. And I thought that would really be a good, encouraging place for him to be. And he ended up there, and he loved the school. He loved it.
I'm delighted to hear that, and I'm really glad that it worked out that E-Town was indeed such a nurturing place for Damon, and to see him grow and thrive throughout his 4 years there. I've ran into him a couple of times at homecoming when he's come back to campus. To me, it's one of my favorite things about the job is to see that progression. So to see someone before they came to E-Town, to see them after, and see that growth and the progress it's amazing. So I'm delighted that I was able to make a difference for Damon.
I appreciate it. So let's talk about you. So you grew up in Costa Rica.
Sure.
So how did you end up going from Costa Rica to Lancaster County, Pennsylvania?
Yeah. So that's a good question. They're not particularly close to each other. So now most people don't know this. I did most of my growing up in Costa Rica. My parents are Costa Rican, and of the first 22 years of my life, 20 of them I spent in Costa Rica. However, I was not born in Costa Rica. I was born in the States. My parents were here in the States for grad school, and that's when I was born. But when I was still a baby, we moved, the three of us, I was the oldest. So my parents and myself moved to Costa Rica when I was still a baby. But I was born in the States. What most people don't know is I was born in Pennsylvania, actually. So, I was, my parents went to Penn State for grad school. So I was born about 2 hours from where I currently live. So it's just kind of funny, you hear, sometimes I'll tell people, I live in E-Town, PA. I was born in State College, PA. So I think Pennsylvania kid through and through. It's like, not really.
I'm between part.
There's a big, 30 plus years in between. But so I did most of my growing up in Costa Rica, and I'd say fairly early on that I wanted to teach. Even from when I was young, I had a passion. Like I got a sense of, I found it very fulfilling when I could help my classmates out, even like in grade school. If one of my buddies had questions or anything, and I could help them out, that was, very gratifying and fulfilling for me. And my parents both worked at University of Costa Rica, so I got to see what the life of faculty was like. And I was like, I know I want to be a professor one day. And in order to do that, I knew I wanted to, I wanted to get a PhD in order to have a full like range of options to, to teach and work. Now, education in Costa Rica is very good up until the undergrad level. So I did my undergrad back in Costa Rica, but I knew if I wanted to fulfill my dream and be a professor, I needed to go abroad, either to Europe or to the States, were my top options for grad school and get my master's and my PhD. And from those, having been born in the States and being much more familiar with American culture, I decided to come to the US for grad school. I ended up doing my master's and PhD at University of Notre Dame. And once I finished my PhD, I started applying for faculty jobs. And I knew top priority for me was, you mentioned Damon seeking a place that had both the baseball side and the engineering side. For me, I wanted to teach at a place where you had a solid accredited engineering program, but where the focus would not just be just on the research, just on the engineering, just on the technical side. I wanted a place where the focus was going to be on that human connection, on being able to mentor my students, coach my students, and develop strong, meaningful relationships with them that hopefully would allow me to not just, I don't know, like have like impact, create impact just through what I did, but also create that ripple effect through all the students that then would be hopefully bolstered through my work. So I applied with that focus of looking for schools that had a strong teaching dimension, a strong mentorship dimension, and still with that also the strong technical engineering side. And from those, there was a handful of schools that stood out. But Elizabethtown College for me, it was one of those things where like the moment that I, visited campus for that interview, I was like, this is the place. Like I could feel it. I could feel the energy. I could feel that the faculty that were there really cared about the students. I could tell that within the students, there was strong peer-to-peer community. And I'll be honest with you, like at the time, I did not know a whole lot about Elizabethtown College. It's not like I was drawn to this particular name. No, like I did some research. And I'm like, oh, this is the kind of program they seem to have there. And yeah, I was like, this seems to be the kind of place where I could really thrive. I was really drawn to the fact that beyond the technical engineering side, it was a school that really cultivates the whole individual. They want students to grow holistically. They want them to grow as a whole person, and that's something that really resonated with me. Like I, as a faculty member, I want to bring my whole self to what I do. I want to be authentic. I want to be me, not just be the person that's writing engineering equations on the board, but really be a human being that's in front of you, sharing that. I'm like, oh, this definitely seems like the place for it. So yeah, so gladly it worked out. That was almost 16 years ago at this point. Yes, it's my 16th year at eTown, and it's been all of that I hoped for and more. It's been a wonderful place to work. Yeah, it's been just every year, I'd say like every day, there's wonderful opportunities to connect with students, and so I ended up living. 30 years later, ended up living 2 hours from the place that I was born. Felt like a coincidence. My mom says that it's not a coincidence, that there's some pull, some energetic spiritual pull, if you will, that attracts you to a place that deep down is home. And maybe there's some truth to that, but yeah, that's basically the story.
That's pretty cool. So before you became a professor, you had to have an interest in engineering,
Yes,
and
yes,
then to acquire the degrees to become a professor. So what first drew you to
yes.
engineering? Was there a particular moment or person that sparked your curiosity?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's a tough one to answer because like engineering is a very multifaceted major. You can do so many different things with it, and people come to engineering from different, let's say, through different paths. There's folks that get into engineering because they love building things. They love to build, put things together, and that's what drew them to engineering. There's some folks that like to sit on their computer and code. Perhaps they love to do diagrams, and that's what drew them to engineering. Um, For me, to be honest, it was mathematics. I was since I was quite little, I loved math, and I mentioned my parents working at University of Costa Rica. They were both math professors at UCR when I was growing up, and they definitely shared with me that love and appreciation of mathematics. So and so there's some folks that love engineering in spite of mathematics. I loved it because of that mathematics. Just being able to look at the way things work, not just in terms of, okay, here's this physical object and this is the way the parts fit together, but more so to be able to step one layer behind, two layers behind, and see these are really all the processes that make these things come alive, right? Like to me, that was absolutely magical. So I'd say from the start, you'd have to trace it like, yeah, way, way back to childhood and kind of like the love of math, that intellectual curiosity that my parents infused in me. Now, you could say, well, why not become a math major? I think in that respect, I was a little bit different from them. So while I had that intellectual curiosity and passion for mathematics, I was also drawn to how this manifested in the real world. So I think it's one of the big differences between an engineering way of thinking and a mathematics way of thinking. In pure math, it's more, you like those functions, you like those formulas for their own beauty in themselves. And an engineer wants to put that at the service of real practical systems. So for me, like the idea of how can I take these concepts, these equations, these formulas that are fascinating and beautiful, and out of that do something that could benefit mankind in some way, that was very, very attractive about engineering. I will say, Mel, I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that it was easy to pick a major. When I was 16, 17 years old, I really struggled with choosing what to do for college, because while engineering was very interesting, it was very appealing, it was not the only thing that was very appealing. Like I'm also always have been really drawn to literature, to the humanities, to creative writing, to languages, things that folks don't really associate a whole lot with engineering. And so at some point I had to make a choice of a major. I've sought to cultivate all those things in my own time and personal life, and hopefully to bring that into the type of faculty member that I am. But it was hard. I think like I see some of my students that at age 19, some of my students have it figured out. They're engineers through and through. And like there's never a moment of hesitation. For me, there was definitely moments of hesitation where I'm like, oh, like engineering is interesting, but there's all this other stuff that's really cool too. So that was the harder thing, was kind of having to say no to other pursuits in terms of pursuing them as an academic major. Yeah, between like that curiosity about like what really drives things, what's behind the scenes driving things, and then how can I use this to do things that hopefully have a positive impact on the world. That's what drew me in.
Can you explain what the Order of the Engineer is?
Yeah. So the Order of the Engineer is essentially a national. Actually, we took inspiration from Canada. It really started in Canada, but it is essentially when you're inducted into the Order of the Engineer, you are pledging, like honoring the profession, honoring a sense of ethics, honoring a professional responsibility. So essentially, you are agreeing that you as an engineer are going to put your talents, your work, your effort at the service of the world to benefit, for the benefit of the greater good. And that you are going to act in ways that are ethical, in ways where you are taking care of the Earth's precious resources to benefit humankind. So it's forget the exact year where this started, but Canada, there's some schools in Canada that really got it going. And then there were some universities in Ohio that brought that to the United States. And we followed that model, adapted it. And gladly, one of my colleagues, Dr. Reed Daly, of my engineering department, brought it to Elizabethtown College and said, hey, let's have a chapter right here. Let's do an induction ceremony for the Order of the Engineer. And that's become a yearly ritual for all the senior engineers that are going out into the workforce to join this Order of the Engineer and essentially fully commit to that sense of ethics, professionalism, and service, which I think it's important. I think, as an engineer, that's always a good thing. I also think it lines up really, really nicely with E-Town College's motto, which is educate for service. So it's like, through your profession, you are being of service to the world.
And just to for clarification for my listeners, the ones
Yeah,
who pledged the ethics promise for the order of the engineer, they will wear a silver ring on their pinky of their what
that's
says their
correct.
working hand, so their dominant
Of
hand.
the working hand. That's right. That's right.
So
Yep.
there'll be a picture on the cover
Yeah.
art with that, and I just want to explain to people what that is.
Well, yeah, yeah, yes, yes,
Okay.
indeed, indeed.
All right. So every career has a turning point. What was the defining moment that changed how you saw yourself as an engineer or as a teacher?
Man, you keep asking great questions, and it's yeah, it's for me. Like if I had to say like one turning point, I'd say during my PhD, I got the opportunity to run my own section of Introduction to Engineering, and that was the first time that I had that level of autonomy. I'd been a TA before, but it was the first time I had that level of autonomy in terms of developing a course, in terms of building relationships with my students, in terms of yeah, just crafting an educational experience that, you know, where I could really make it my own. And that experience was extremely, extremely rich and vivid and positive. I intro to engineering for folks that might not have a lot of familiarity. That's a course that folks will take in their first semester. Perhaps it's a 2 semester experience, but it's usually those first year students in college that get to take intro to engineering. So this was back at Notre Dame. And through it, I got to learn from other instructors that were, more experienced than myself. And at the same time, I got to interact very, very closely with these young students. I mean, most of them are 18 years old, like fresh out of high school, starting to learn about what engineering is, and just seeing that level of enthusiasm. Sometimes there were some folks that perhaps had the enthusiasm, but had that also at the same time that self doubt that comes with going to a rigorous program and not being sure, hey, am I going to be able to do this? Uh, that was extremely, let's say, I'll say like grounding, but like it was something that really cemented like, oh, this is something that I can do. Like this is something that can be my career. So in the PhD process, most of the time you're working on your dissertation. It's very, very, very research focused. A lot of programs will kind of look at it as like, well, you can do some teaching on the side if you want to, but it's definitely not something that is where most PhD students are going to dedicate most of their time to teaching. But just for me, like, don't get me wrong, I enjoyed the research aspect, but just feeling that deep level of satisfaction that came for me from the mentorship, the course development, the working with other like teaching colleagues, to helping these like young like first year students navigate the challenges of just getting into engineering. That just for me was like, whoop, okay, this is definitely the path that I want to go. And it also confirmed for me that I wanted to be in a place like E-Town. So I absolutely love Notre Dame. I had lots of great experiences there. It's a much bigger school than E-Town. And in Intro to Engineering, there was lab sections, and I was in charge of like one of the like learning studio lab sections, and those were smaller. But there was a Intro to Engineering big lecture session that was in an auditorium, and that was over 300 students. And that was another thing where like I looked around as a TA, like of the lecture portion as well, and being like, man, like if I'm a first year student and I see there's 300 other kids sit in an auditorium, like there's no way that I'm going to go to the instructor for office hours. There's no way that, yeah, like how am I going to build like any type of rapport here? Like it felt like a pretty intimidating space. So for me, like both like feeling the kind of close mentorship and like the type of real educational experience that happened with a smaller classroom, and just seeing like, ooh, I want to do more of this. And then on the other hand, seeing like the far more distant learning environment in the 300 plus person auditorium. For me, it also was like, okay, I know I definitely want to go work at a school like E-Town, a smaller school where I'm going to have, the smaller classes and the close contact with the students.
Okay. So, what's a story from your classroom or lab that still makes you smile years later?
Yeah. So, man, there's a lot of stories. So one that just because and this is just fresh in my mind, just because I just shared about this particular course, but this was one that surprised me. It's one of those things like you mentioned the story with with your son, and how it shows that a lot of times the things that we say, we don't really know and understand the impact that they're going to have one way or another until much later, right? Like there's things that can just be kind of like, just a casual remark that you're making as a faculty member, and can either really hurt someone, or really give someone confidence, or really challenge someone too. So in this particular intro to engineering course at Notre Dame, they were team-based projects, as we have a lot of in engineering, teams of 5 students working together to come up with a project. And I remember there was one particular team where there was a student, and I guess I'll use the first name, a student named Amanda. And Amanda was right off the bat, like the most motivated person regarding the project. She definitely took a leadership role right away in terms of brainstorming ideas of what type of project they wanted to do. I'm like, man, like Amanda has so many ideas, and she's getting everyone organized, and like this group is ticking because of Amanda. I was very impressed by her work. Now, later on in the semester, they had to assign roles where I don't remember exactly what the 5 roles were, but one was essentially team leader was one of them. There was another one that was like in charge of operations. I believe there was, like one in charge of budget. There was one that was recorder. So recorder would basically, take the meeting minutes and things of that nature. And these are all important jobs. But in any case, when they turned in their assignment of, hey, here's our, the what each person got assigned to, I saw that Amanda was not the team leader, and in fact was just, I'll say, Amanda was the recorder. She was the recorder of the recorder of the minutes in this team. And I'll tell you right there, like that did not sit well with me at all. I'm like, I am seeing this person that is clearly like has been leading from the start, like organically has taken this role, and like the whole team is operating at a high level thanks to her. Now it's like now the roles are officially assigned, and someone else is the leader, and Amanda's just the recorder. So I had a conversation with her, and I was like, I noticed this, like I'm surprised, by this. And she like in the moment, I think was surprised to hear from me, and that I mentioned that. The next time that they submitted like their new information, they had changed the roles. They had said like, leader is Amanda, and then they had redistributed the other roles. Someone else was the recorder. Apparently the conversation was not like a tense one at all. It kind of felt like she had by default fallen into that recorder role. Now, at the time, I'm like, okay, this is a win that, someone who organically was the leader indeed now is officially, the leader, as should be the case. And I did not think a whole lot of it. The rest of their project went great. They did amazing and so on. But it was close to 12 years later that I got an email out of the blue from Amanda. And this was an email thanking me for that moment. She said, like so many times since then, throughout her career as a woman working in a male-dominated sphere, she had experienced those assumptions of like, well, you're a woman, so you got relegated to these roles. Like, leadership is for men. And that moment when I challenged her to be like, hey, no, like you deserve more than this. Like go, like, advocate for yourself to do this. That was a pivotal, like life-changing career moment for her, when it's like, ooh, like simultaneously, yes, I can do this, but no one's going to give it to me. I gotta go advocate for myself and do this. And that since then, she has continued to do that, throughout her career. Turns out it was an incredibly empowering thing. And 12 years later, she shared all these stories of ways that she had indeed like advocated for herself, and like grown professionally, and developed like, this beautiful career for herself, thanks to that moment. For me, that's one that it was very meaningful. It was very meaningful, and surprising, in the sense of like, in the moment, it felt like, okay, this is but it opened up my eyes to the fact that, these little things that we do can indeed impact someone in such meaningful ways, right? And there are, like, the other thing that impacted me as well was that everybody is fighting challenges and battles that we are not aware of, right? Like, I don't think her peers at the time were like, oh, I don't think consciously they thought, well, you're a female student, you just, write down the notes, we'll lead. I don't think it was a conscious decision like that. But up until that moment, I guess I had not really, like, in such a direct conscious way thought about like these are the like extra battles that, for example, a female student in a strongly like male dominated career and workplace is going to have to battle. So yeah, so I guess that's the one where, like, I think about that. I'm extremely proud of Amanda for advocating for herself. I'm extremely grateful to her for sharing that with me, right? For like 12 years later, that she had the presence of mind to say, you know what, I'm going to reach out to my old like intro to engineering instructor from way back when and let him know like what a difference he made. That was incredibly touching. Um, yeah, I could share others, but that's an important one for me.
Yeah, that's a great one. That is a really good one. So engineering can be kind of abstract to outsiders. How do you turn technical
Yes.
lessons into human stories that your students can relate to?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and I think it's one of the many reasons why I'm thankful to work at a place like eTown, where it's a program that really puts that human dimension at the center of engineering. So we do it in a number of ways. One that to me is very very striking is in the sophomore year, there's our community-based engineering project course. And it's a full semester, it's teams of 5 students, and they work with a community partner. The idea is you get to put your engineering talents at the service of the community. They come to you with, hey, these are needs that we have. And it could be anywhere from, we've had like, pet shelters, we've had historic homes that need repair, we've had folks who work with students with disabilities that might need help developing tools that are more stimulating or useful from a sensory standpoint. So right off the bat, like, these students get to see, like, I'm not just like doing some cool stuff by like building these things or programming these things. Right off the bat, there's a human being that I'm impacting. So like the priority in that course is you are, I'd say, like, compared to senior, especially to the senior level projects, it's simpler type of engineering, it's simpler projects, but you are learning how to communicate with non-engineers. You're learning how to stick to a timeline, how to stick to a budget, and you're learning how to communicate your ideas in ways that will be meaningful to others. I think it's the first time that a lot of our students learn, just because I think something's a great idea, it might not be useful to somebody else. Like, I might have this like, hey, this is what you definitely have to do, and someone might tell you like, no, that's not what I need at all. That doesn't really match like what I need in my life. So it's one of those moments where engineers really learn, or like our engineering students really learn, that at the core of why we're doing engineering, it's asking, what problem am I solving? Who am I serving? What problem am I solving? Who am I serving? And if you start there, everything else flows from there. If you don't start there, then you can have this awesome, mind-blowing project and could be like technically really cool and be completely useless, or even worse, like detrimental, right, to a person, to society, and so on. So that is one way that we at eTown do it rather intentionally. It carries over to the junior and senior project experiences. So junior year, even before they do any sorts of getting in there and building and or doing equations, you first ask that question of like, what community are we serving through this project? So the early assignments in that junior year, and that carries over into that senior project, are reaching out to people, talking to people, and figuring out what are their needs. What could I do to make these people's lives better? And so we've had a lot of excellent projects there. Like, one that comes to mind is folks that partnered with local firefighters. And so like, they're like, you know what, I think there was like one previous connection where like one of the students knew someone who was a firefighter, and they thought of that. But it was one of the like finest examples of just, before you even get to designing all the mechanical components and whatnot, like, you are like reaching out to that community you want to serve and see like, what actually are your problems, and how could we as engineers come in and help you? For them, like in that particular project, it was they ended up designing a cleaning, racking, drying system for hoses for firefighters. Like, apparently, again, like you a lot of times is feel like engineers are guilty of this. Like, we'll go in thinking we have the answers. It's like, hey, here, use my product that me and my company created. It'll make your life so much better. But this to me is it's the opposite. We're asking, okay, like, like how can we help you? Like, what are your problems? And yeah, and this was like the problem of like how time consuming, like how energy intensive it was to dry the hoses, was one that, yeah, most people I think don't know that a lot of the local firefighters have. So, our engineers took that back, and out of there generated some potential solutions. And they're like, hey, we're thinking of going this way. There's also this possibility. And from there, soliciting feedback right away from, like, some of the solutions that they thought were brilliant. They're like, ooh, this is such clever engineering. The firefighters are going to tell them, no, we would never use that. That's not practical in this setting. So we're not going to use that. At the end of the day, like they came through a lot of designs, redesigns, like, seeking feedback, reincorporating that feedback. They designed an awesome project. And I was very proud of that work. But to me, that's at the center of it. It's like first identifying, like, who do I want to serve? Who do I want to benefit? Can think of a bunch of other ones, but that's a very striking one for me, where it stood out in terms of just, okay, this is someone, it's a local organization, it's a local community, we can reach out to them and really make a difference. And how a lot of times, what you thought were like the awesome features, hey, you actually have to scale back on that, because really it's not about how cool your project is, it's about what difference you're making for people.
Right? So you probably define that pretty generally as successful project. So how do you personally define success? Not just in your profession, but in your life?
Yeah, that's it's a great question. I think everybody would benefit from asking themselves that question. And it's one that I revisit periodically. I can tell you that when I can think of a successful day, if, let's say, when I go home from work, from the office, and I think back, and there's a couple of moments where I'm like, oh, there's at least a couple of moments where I can say, like, well, I made a difference for someone. I impacted someone in a positive way. Someone else's life is better thanks to my work. That alone makes it a successful workday. If I can go to bed and point to that, and also think of ways that I've grown as a person, then more holistically for me, that's a successful. On a given day, like, I ask myself, hey, whose life did I make better? Like, was I able to impact someone in a positive? And it doesn't have to be like in some grand way, but sometimes it's just even through a smile, a word of encouragement, through a good lesson where, like, I put in the work, what have you, through a coaching conversation. If I was able to do that on a given day and impact someone in a positive way, hey, that's a successful day right there, right? Like, I already did my part to contribute to the general well-being and to someone's well-being. That said, like, for me, like, in terms of more holistically, what I consider success is, I think, like, a feeling like, for me, success is closely aligned with the concept of alignment and balance. If I feel that what I'm doing, like my actions, how I'm investing my time in a day-to-day basis, aligns with my values, aligns with the way that I want to impact the world, to me, that's successful. And if I feel that, like, in terms of my own growth as a person, that the growth that I'm experiencing, it also aligns in term, like, with my values and my passions, to me, again, that's success. And I think it's important to ask oneself that question, because it will evolve. And I think if we don't, society will be really, really quick to define it for you. Right. In some of my upper level classes, my technical classes, I'll pose this question to my students as to, what does it mean to you? How would you define success for yourself right now or in the future? And you do see that, like, a lot of students have never asked themselves that, like, in such an explicit way. And if you don't ask yourself this, then, I mean, yeah, society will be quick to tell you, oh, it's lots of money, it's a lot of career promotions. Like, that's what that is, right? And That's not to say there's anything wrong with wanting to grow professionally and so on, but I think for almost everybody, once you look a little bit deeper, there's a whole lot more, right? There's a whole lot more. And so for me, like if I can look at my life and say, you know what, I have lived in a way that aligns with my values, I have done some good in the world. I felt that, I personally have grown, have cultivated my gifts. That's important. Now, I'll say there's blessings and curses to all of this because I mentioned earlier that I had a hard time choosing a major, and I did. I know that now being again, I've been a professor for 16 years, and my like the variety of interests and dimensions of my life that I would like to cultivate is still really wide and really varied. Again, I think sometimes I envy folks that are more like one track minded. Hey, all I care about is being an engineering faculty, and that's it. That defines me. And you know, success is just being really awesome at teaching engineering, and that's it. For me, as a human being, there's so much more that I want to cultivate. There's so much more of the world that I want to explore. There's so much more of myself that in terms of learning, growth, in terms of body, mind, spirit that I want to keep growing. And it makes it more exciting, but it also makes it more challenging, right? Because it's not like I can point to this one thing and tell you, hey, that's a metric. Yeah, it's more this lived experience on a day to day basis. And I don't recall if we have a specific question based off of this, but one of the things where it has certainly evolved for me over the years has been a switch from outcome orientation to process orientation in terms of success, in terms of happiness as well. It's something that I definitely encourage my students to think about, like the better. So just to clarify a little bit, because some folks may have heard about outcome versus process orientation, but others may have not. So what I mean by that is like defining like outcome orientation is like, say you're a student, you're going to take a test and you say, oh, success is if I get a 95 or higher on that test. Whatever you did, it's once you get that test back, that external thing, that mark, that thumb of approval, or that mark of approval or not, that determines success or not. And it determines your level of happiness. It determines your appraisal of your self-worth, all these things, right? Like we do it to ourselves so much. You're like, oh, if I get that promotion, I get to feel good. If I don't get the promotion, I'm a loser, I get to feel bad. If I don't know, I got a crush on someone, I ask them out. If they say yes, then I'll feel great. If they say no, then I feel terrible and I'm a loser. I feel like as a younger man, I was definitely more on that outcome focus of like, well, I need these things. I need a PhD. I need my career to look like a certain way in order to call myself successful. As I've gotten older, it has definitely shifted to look, there's a lot of things in terms of those outcomes where like I can do my part, but there's a lot of things I don't control, right? Like you see it in the sports world a lot. You mentioned Damon playing baseball, and a lot of times it's like, oh, I'll feel good if my team wins. Like if we win, then we feel good. If we lose, we feel bad. Well, you don't really control how well the other team plays, right? And you could do your absolute best, and maybe the other guys did a little bit better, and you lost the game. Well, hell, you can still feel really, really proud of yourself for doing your best, putting in the time and the effort day in and day out, and just make yourself proud that way. For me, that's you're much more successful, even if like at the end the scoreboard says the other team won, than if your team won, yes, but you performed below what you could have asked of yourself. So to me, it's like it's shifted really far away from all these external markers of I need to hit these benchmarks of whatever, whether it's professional success or financial success or anything. Like I really don't care too much about any of that. And it's more just on a day-to-day basis, on a moment-to-moment basis, am I living in a way that aligns with who I want to be, and am I growing in the right direction?
What have your students taught you about resilience, creativity, and maybe even failure?
Yeah. So I mentioned earlier that one of the lessons that I think we all learn at some point is that everybody else is fighting challenges that are different from our own. and that we might have no idea about, right? And while I face my own challenges, and I have faced my own challenges, for example, having grown up in Costa Rica and coming to the States and not being familiar with a lot of the culture, and trying to, like now living in a place that is so different from the place where I grew up. Sure, it comes with some challenges, but from a lot of my students, I've seen different versions that challenges manifest and different ways that students can overcome them. So, for example, at ETOwn, we have a lot of first generation students, and these are students that, like nobody in their family had ever had the opportunity to go to college. And they're like, hey, I'm the first one. I'm the first one. And they'll come to me with some questions that, as somebody who is very familiar with the academic world, I mentioned both of my parents being faculty members. So that was not a challenge for me. I was definitely had a lot of guidance in terms of navigating the academic world. And there's questions that sometimes I'm like, oh, well, that's, I would have thought that a first year student would already know the answer to. Well, clearly not, because they haven't had the guidance of someone go through the process and mentor them as to this is the way that you face a certain challenge as a first year student, a way that you navigate a certain situation, that type of thing. So seeing that there's like as a first generation student, like so many of the students at ETOwn are navigating these challenges and are persevering through, like navigating worlds that are different, uncertain, where there's norms, there's expectations that they're not familiar with, without having that figure, the way that I had my parents to kind of guide me through. To me, it's really, really admirable, and it's something that like I really tip my hat to my students who are able to thrive in that space, and be able to navigate it and come out on the other side. So also, I'm thinking of, yes, in terms of other challenges, this is one that's a little bit more similar to my own, but I've had international students who, when they first come to the States, struggle with English, struggle with the language. And they start out not getting great grades, especially in that first year seminar where there's a lot of writing, intro to engineering, there's a lot of writing. And they'll, like not have a very high GPA at the start. They'll experience a sense of homesickness. They'll experience lack of belonging, self-doubt as to like, well, I see other, some of my classmates don't have to put in nearly as much time as me and they're getting A's. And meanwhile, I'm putting in all this extra time and I'm just getting a C in this class. And then I've seen those students start out there, then persevere once they get that language piece figured out, end up being like at the top of the class by the time they're seniors. I've seen some of these students then go on to have amazing careers, go on to grad school and get doctorates and what have you, or just, be extremely successful in industry. And again, these are students that I think like at other places, someone could look at like, man, yeah, you got to see an intro to engineering. What are you even doing? Like, that's, you're at the bottom of the class, and seeing those students still persevere with, the challenges in language and culture and overcome that, to me is it's very inspiring. I mentioned like I shared the story of Amanda, but I'm also like really just like I also tip my hat to like so many of my female students that have to deal with those challenges of like, sometimes I'm teaching a class where there's, 22 students and there's one female student and 21 male students. And just it's something that I, as a man in a male dominated field, did not have to face those challenges, but understanding now, like how much harder that is when you look around and it's like everyone else here looks, different than I do. That's a challenge. I look at and they can manifest in different ways. Like I think of, our female students, I think of our students of color in a primarily white institution. Again, there's cases where I got 20 kids in a class and, there's, one black student or one Latino student and everyone else is white. And just recognizing that someone said, you know what, I'm not going to let this limit me. I'm going to go in there and still I'm going to hold my own. I'm going to advocate for myself. I'm going to thrive here, recognizing that takes a special brand of courage. It takes a special brand of resilience. To me, it's, it's something like I admire my students that see that, still go right in, still push through and thrive. I mean, because it's hard. And I'll say like I hope that those students see me as an advocate. Like I root for 100% of my students, but especially for those that I recognize as facing additional challenges, for the students that might think of themselves as being like on the outside from different points of view in the engineering world. I'm like, hey, I'm here for you. And when I see those students overcome and thrive and succeed, yeah, it gives me a tremendous amount of joy.
So is that one of the passions that is that one of the things that keeps you passionate about teaching after all these years?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It goes back to like you asked, how do you make engineering more human, right? Yeah. How do you make engineering more human? It's about the impact that you have on people, like ultimately. And for me with teaching is very much the same way. I could teach the exact same control systems technical content, and it's not the exact same. Like I'll say engineering does evolve. There's new technologies coming out that you're incorporating. Sure. So, but even if it were mainly the same core technical content, you're working with different people. Every time the person that you have in front of you is faced with different challenges, has different hopes and dreams, and you're going to help them unlock something different within themselves. I, yeah, like someone asked me, oh, so you teach engineering? I'm like, no, I teach people. I teach people. I teach engineering to people, yes, but it's very much like the human aspect to me is the most important one. And there, every single time, you've got a new set of human beings, right? Like you got new faces, you've got new minds, you've got folks who are curious about different things, who want to make an impact in the world in different ways. And to me, being able to connect with that human dimension is what, I'm very confident and optimistic that, a professor for 16 years and for a long time, going forward, like I don't see myself getting bored of it. Because again, if it were strictly about the subject matter, then yeah, potentially I could get bored of teaching, circuits or teaching controls or what have you. But if it's a matter of like, hey, here's somebody that's coming to me because they want to grow, like they've got hopes, they've got motivation, but they also have fears and concerns and they need some guidance. Hey, to me, that's something where like every single year it's fresh and different, and every single year like I know that I'm being of service to somebody else. And yeah, that I'm passionate about.
That's awesome. So I just have one more question for you, but before we get to that question, I want to come full circle on how we started this conversation with my son and his decision to go to Elizabethtown. So he enrolled there in 2016, the fall of 2016. And just to complete the story, he graduated in 2020, which happened to be the COVID years. Didn't actually get to walk across the stage and all that stuff. We sat on the couch in our living room and watched his name scroll across the TV screen, which was unfortunate, but
Yep.
he learned another level of resilience, as did his entire class that year. And he graduated with a degree in
Yes.
mechanical engineering. So he's now an engineering manager at an international company, and he owes his success to the education he received at Elizabethtown College and the mentorship from professors like you and Dr. Atwood and Dr. Reed Daly and all the others who were involved. So I want to say from the bottom of my heart, really thank you and appreciate everything you did for him and all the other students who come in contact with you.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Mel. And that's why we do what we do. I know that I have spoken in the first person singular through most of it and say like I have this, but I know that I can speak for my colleagues here as well. Everybody in my department is at Town College because we share that mission. Like we want to be able to impact young students, especially young students that yeah, that could use the coaching, right? I feel like there's some students that have already come in with all the support in the world. They came from a high school where they had like just all the privilege in the world, all the guidance. And it's like, okay, well, you know, we could just give you the textbooks and you'd be fine. But for most students, this is not the case. For most students, you need the mentorship, you need the coaching, you need the guidance, you need that human support. So yeah, I know for all of us at eTown, it's something we're really, really passionate about. And I'm, yeah, delighted to hear that. I'm really grateful to you, Mel, for sharing that. And Damon, if you're listening to this, congratulations. I'm hella proud of you.
All right, and for our final question of the day, when your career is said and done, what's the story you hope people will remember about you as a
Yeah.
professor, to
So
be specific?
yeah, So I don't know that I would like, that I'm going to focus on like a single story, a single anecdote, but I want folks to think of me as someone who was authentic and allowed them to be their authentic selves too. If they're like, oh yeah, whether they had me like back in 2010 or in 2030, they're like, oh, I could go to Estrada and like, I loved going to his class because he was himself. He was a human being and he was authentic and real with me. And that in turn allowed me to be authentic and real and discover things about myself that, yeah, perhaps were scary, perhaps were challenging. Like I hope that's the case. I hope that's the case. Yeah, whenever alums share stuff like that and tell me that I'm accomplishing that to some extent along those lines, that's what makes me proudest.
All right, that's a great way to end this episode today. So our guest today has been Elizabethtown College engineering professor Dr. Tomás Estrada. Tomás, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Mel. It was delightful to chat with you. Thank you for all the great questions. And I'm, again, really grateful to you for sharing what you shared about Damon. I know that I speak for the whole team at E-Town when we say like we're like this is our goal, this is our mission. I'm honored that you took the time to share this space with me and bring me on your show.
It was great having you here. So if you want more information about my guest and the things we discussed today, you can go to my website at podcastreallife.com for some links. Dr. Estrada, Elizabethtown College, the Order of the Engineer, some of the other things that we discussed. There will be all of those links in the show notes. So that's it for today's episode of Stories from Real Life. Join us again next time for another chance to learn from each other. Until then, don't forget to shine your light wherever you